All right, here we go, Mike.
Here we go. Well, welcome again. Thank you to Educast. Thank you to all of the wonderful moderators for keeping the sessions lively and upbeat and positive. I'm Michael, and I'm here with Leo. Unfortunately, Andrew couldn't make it. He's sweating it out in the Dominican Republic at the moment. Boo-hoo to him. Yeah, no, but we are excited to be here. We are going to talk to you a little bit about this idea called organic approaches, and we're going to focus on organic approaches and really what they mean to achieving and building your own sustainable business. So the title of our presentation is Organic Approaches and Building a Sustainable Business. So let's look at the goals for today. So we have three main goals we're going to work through today. The first one is we want to introduce you to this idea of organic approaches, and we're going to center that around two main approaches. One that many of you know, task-based language teaching, or TBLT, and another one that a few of you might know, which is called DOGME, ELT. Secondly, we'll show you how these approaches are conducive to a sustainable business. And then finally, we'll wrap things up by really demonstrating how these approaches solve, the most common obstacles that teachers and teacherspreneurs more specifically face as they move towards building a sustainable business. But let's start off with a little bit about us. So we are Learn Your English, and we are an online educational company that really helps teachers thrive personally, professionally, and entrepreneurially. And we've been together since 2016, and we are really three like-minded individuals who really think, our goal in life as proponents of teacherpreneurship and furthering teacher development, we really want to help teachers, bloom where they're planted. And we really want to help them find out how they can be the best version of themselves so that the teaching that they do really comes out in their students. And what we try to do is help teachers take all those great ideas and put them into their first course that they can promote, sell, create, and use as a brick to build their sustainable business. Now, I'd like to think that the reason we've become such a popular powerhouse in teacher development and teacherpreneurship is because of our charming attitudes and funny jokes we try to tell. But unfortunately, it's not, folks. No, I think why we are so engaging, and the reason I think teachers find our sessions so meaningful, is that we really, in our coaching, we really try to implement these three facets of teaching development, and we really find ourselves at the nexus of where these three pillars come and combine. And really, we really draw in the theory, the research, and blend that with the teacher's personal and practical knowledge, so that again, they can improve in a way that's meaningful to them. And one way we try to spread what we do is through our podcast. And our podcast is a great place where we really help bridge what's happening in the research world with the day-to-day practice of what we're all doing in our classrooms. It's also a great space for us to share some of the success stories of the teachers who have worked with us as they develop their own teaching skills, but also how they moved from relying on teaching at a school and moving towards building their own business, again, through the creating, promoting, and selling of their own course. And if you'd like to stay up to date with what we do, I really would encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, the Thriving Teacherpreneur newsletter. And the reason is really because I think teachers really, at the end of the day, want great ideas. And really, we try to provide free weekly actionable tips for growing your own teaching business. It doesn't take a lot of time. And again, it just gives you more ammunition, more ideas to bring into the classroom and help your students grow. Now, if you are teaching at a school and you really like to kind of branch out on your own, or you have a great idea and you really like to turn it into a course, well, you can also join our free community. And in this space, we actually look at what students or what teachers in particular might need to do. We look at some of the obstacles and hurdles you might encounter as you first set out to achieve this new goal. And we really help you, we really help you weed out some of the issues that you might encounter. Excuse me. And we provide a community, a very supportive community where you can get some immediate academic support with your plans, but also share your ideas within an extensive community. And for some of you that already have a course out there, or you have something that you really already know you want to design and share with the world, we also offer a teacher accelerator program, which branches off from the what you need to do and really looks at the how. And this is where we come in and we coach you and we really help you get your business off the ground in the right way. So today's presentation is going to follow the following flow. We'll start off with really looking at the current situation in terms of how teachers are approaching lessons, some of the materials and supplies, resources that are out there. We'll see if we'll reveal some of the problems that this has caused, perhaps in terms of workload and also results in our classroom. We'll then present a couple solutions, again, focusing on the organic approaches of additional language acquisition. And of course, we'll pinpoint in particular how we can help. So let's have a look at the current situation. And again, really what we're looking at here are the materials and resources that are out there currently for teachers. So as many of you know, there are all kinds of materials out there. And, these are contained typically in lesson banks. And really, they provide lessons plans for teachers. Now, there are some drawbacks to these, though, because typically they offer paid subscriptions. It doesn't really get at the problem, which is teachers actually don't want to spend more time searching for stuff. They actually want to just have real strategies that they can use and transfer to other teaching concepts. So it doesn't really get us past this idea of stress reduction. In fact, it is quite stressful to kind of search the internet and scour through these banks looking for lesson plan ideas. And then you do all that work and then they don't resonate with the students, which is often quite struggling and challenging. And then of course, it leads you to find the ways that you can adapt these lessons, which again takes up more lesson planning time. Now, another resource that's out there that a lot of teachers draw on are course books. And again, course books are great, and they typically offer a wide range of topics, and they provide a very kind of structured framework for teaching. So they could be a support for a lot of teachers who are out there just starting. But the issue is that a lot of teachers find that they're very prescriptive, that they set out with a very clear vision of how the lesson should progress, and it doesn't give much. It doesn't really appreciate the individual needs of the learners that you're meeting with on a daily basis. Also, they're costly. And of course, not everyone has the financial resources as a teacher or a student to pay for these subscriptions or to get these resources. And in many cases, they don't align with how people actually learn. Again, they're not really focusing on approaches that are student-centered. They're, again, prescribing an approach that they feel is the optimal way for students to learn. Also, there's this lack of authenticity. There's a lot of school talk or teacher talk that's built into this. So it's not really representative of real English or how English is used in the real world. And of course, they're just general, right? They're not specific, again, to the specific needs of your learners. In fact, there's this nice little acronym. They teach English for nebulous purposes, right? And really, it's a kind of catch-22, right? How much do we really want to use them as a crutch? And how much do we really want to focus on what the students actually need and want? And then, of course, as Monica was talking about, there's the time that we dedicate to planning lessons. And that many times the CELTA courses, the certificate courses that we take, they're great because it does provide us with a framework. The only problem is that implementing this framework is typically very time consuming, and we end up spending hours planning lessons. And therefore, it's not really a sustainable approach for your own teaching practice, but especially if you really want to branch out and teach lots of privates or design a group-paced course. It's not conducive to those environments, and therefore it leads to this additional burnout. And again, it's tough because we very rarely repeat the same lesson. So what's the point of actually going through and investing all of this time and energy into something that we might use once, and then we're left with nothing. So what is the solution? Well, what teachers really need to do is they need to tap into their potential. And Leah is going to share a story with you to help illuminate this.
Yes, thanks, Mike. This is a very interesting story because it really connects to everything that Monica was saying in her presentation, something that we have been trying to communicate and a message that we've been trying to get across with a lot of teachers. And the anecdote goes very much like this. There was this giant ship engine that had failed, and the ship's owners, they tried one expert after another, but none of them could actually figure out exactly how to fix the engine of that ship. So then they decided to bring in this old man who'd been fixing ships since he was a very young boy. And what was interesting is that he carried with him a large bag of tools. And when he arrived, he immediately went to work. He inspected the engine very carefully, top to bottom, bottom to top. And two of the ship owners were there, of course. They were watching this man, hoping that he would know exactly what to do. And after looking things over, the old man reached into his large bag of tools and he pulled out what seemed like a very, very tiny hammer. Not the kind of hammer that you would see in a toolbox, but a tiny little one. And he basically gently tapped something, and instantly the ship engine lurched into life. And he carefully put his little baby hammer away, and boom, the engine was fixed. Of course, a week later, the owners received a bill from the old man for about $10,000. And one of the owners said, "What? $10,000? He hardly did anything." So very angry, they wrote the old man a note saying, "Please send us an itemized bill." And of course, the old man read that, sent a bill that read the following: tapping with a hammer, $2. Knowing where to tap, $9,998. And what's the moral of the story here for us? Making an effort is really important, but knowing where to make an effort makes all the difference for us. And this is why we truly believe that organic approaches to teaching are the solution to a lot of the problems that we are currently encountering with students. For me, as a university, college, and private institution teaching, working with teacher training, the biggest battle in the classroom has always been to effectively engage students while at the same time getting them to produce tangible results in the language. And of course, as language teachers, we've all experienced at one time or another in our lives those dreaded looks on students' faces of boredom, vapidness, disinterest, confusion. The lesson plan, as Mike said, it looks great on paper. It follows all the tried and trusted steps, everything that we've learned in our certificate courses. But when we implement that in the classroom, it just falls flat. The class is not only a failure, but it becomes eventually a waste of time. The class is not enjoyable for the students, it's not constructive. The lesson plans point to being quickly forgotten if they were actually eventually to be learned at all. So to be fair, there will always be the students in class who are perennially turned on, the students who are always listening attentively, taking notes and asking questions. Unfortunately, the vast majority will always be the students who will offer the opposite, doing as little as possible as they can and learning even less. But what I've found is that the bulk of the students in any given class will learn one way or the other, with the teacher or without the teacher. But everything is contingent on the teacher's approach, which brings me to the million-dollar question. What is this approach? How do you win students over? How do you engage them in the lesson? How do you have them communicate effectively and retain all the language that they produced? The answer for me, the answer for Mike, and the answer for all the teachers that have been working with us has been one thing: organic learning. And of course, organic learning is nothing an eureka moment. Organic learning is very much what Monica was saying, but organic learning is learning that occurs in a very natural state. It's like we don't have to use any pesticides to contaminate our crops. it's learning that develops from within a student. The student develops the curiosity about a topic. They develop curiosity about a concept. They develop curiosity about a problem or even an idea. And then we seek out methods to satisfy this curiosity. So the outside world does not interfere with this process. The motivation to learn is intrinsic. It radiates from within. And that's exactly what these two approaches do: task-based language teaching and DOGME ELT. And Mike is going to go ahead and talk more about TBLT.
Thanks, Leo. So what is TBLT? Well, task-based language teaching is an approach that really is a meaning-focused approach. And really what we want to do is we want to put students in tasks that really help them learn, but they learn by doing. And not only that, they're learning through using tasks that are relevant to their daily lives. And as they do that, they're attaching what they're doing in class to their real worlds. And it's really enhancing that idea, that constructive transfer. And as they do this, they're actually discovering their own gaps, and they're noticing the different areas of their language that they can nuance and refine and make better. So again, it focuses on meaning first. It works with the resources the student have, and then we refine later. But I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, well, I do a lot of that. Well, do you or don't you? Because really there's a difference between a standard activity and a task. So let's explore this idea of what constitutes a task. Really, tasks are affordances, right? They're affordances that engage learners in the kind of cognitive processes. And that's important to remember, that arise outside of the students. Again, they're focusing on meaning and form in the context of their situation of the task. And as a result of achieving this communicative process, they're drawing on all sorts of other cognitive abilities, right? They're thinking of things, cognitive functions. They're doing things like comparing and contrasting. They're problem solving. They're using critical thinking skills. And it's really those cognitive processes, as Alice says, that really promotes additional language acquisition. But again, what separates a task from a standard activity? Well, first of all, tasks always have a clear purpose. Okay, they're not linear goals. There's a task that must be achieved. There's an end goal. And in order to achieve that goal, we're going to walk the students through a series of steps. And these steps are, as I said earlier, are the ones that require the cognitive and communicative processes that engage the learners. And in order to show us that they have achieved the learning outcome, there's a clear kind of set outcome. So there's some sort of evidence of learning that they can create at the end of the task. And again, that task is something that that evidence of learning is something that can be measured. So let's look at a real world example. So a task we could work with would be making a restaurant reservation. So the goal is, again, making a successful restaurant reservation. So some of the steps, they might want to visit the websites. They're going to compare some different options. They're going to need to make a decision, negotiate with one another, make a decision. They're going to need to make a phone call or book online. And then they're going to get that confirmation in one form or the other. So what are some processes involved in that? Well, of course, they're reading information. They're using compare and contrast functions. They're negotiating. They're thinking of reasoning and rationalizing their choices. How do we know that they've successfully achieved the task? Well, they're going to show us that successful booking. And then again, how do we know that they've completed the task? Well, they're going to share with us the confirmation email they received.
And
So
Mike,
I was just going to add, it's quite different from just say, have the students work in a role play and complete. There's a clear outcome that they're achieving. Yeah, Leo?
What I was going to say is one of the reasons why task-based language teaching is an organic learning is because it's what you said, is embracing this idea of language as a communication tool that also involves the understanding of how all of the pieces of the entire concept work together, as opposed to a more piecemeal approach, which is what mostly we see in English language teaching, where we teach one specific grammatical aspect of the language. We expect them to use that little piece to put all the concept together. And this is one of the reasons why this is an organic approach. And the second solution for us is DOGME ELT. To those of you who are not familiar with DOGME ELT, this is actually also an organic approach that naturally emerged in the early 2000s. And it basically, I would say, it's the kind of approach that really resonates with organic learning, because as I said, we're learning to converse in the language. We're learning to talk in the language. We're not so much talking about the language. And what happens is all of these interactions, all of these opportunities for students to actually communicate in the language will provide us with opportunities to deal with language that will naturally emerge out of those processes, out of those examples that Mike just used in the restaurant. And it's interesting because it is really a responsive pedagogy. We're not preemptively teaching language. We're basically reacting to whatever language the students are producing. And more importantly, we are working with language at the point of need. So whenever we see that students really need to communicate a certain message and we see that they're struggling, that's when we intervene and help them and scaffold. And I'm actually going to use a term that I have learned very recently. It's what we call instructional conversation, because the teacher is listening very carefully and the teacher is making guesses about the intended meaning. And he can, of course, interject, he can ask for clarification. And as he is making guesses about this intended meaning, he is adjusting, or she is adjusting their responses to assist the students' efforts. So instruction communication, it basically centers, or DOGME ELT centers on the role that communication plays in the teaching learning process, independent of the type of student learner, the subject matter, or even the instructional setting. And DOGME ELT is basically teaching that is text-driven, meaning we can work with spoken text, but we can also work with written text. It is also materials light, removing the burden of having to think of what lesson plan to use, removing the burden of thinking about which course book should I use with my students. And of course, by creating these opportunities for people to converse in the language, we can reactively focus on the language that naturally emerged from these conversations. And the best way to define emergent language, and to those of you who don't know, we actually had Richard Chin and Danny Norton Davis in our podcast. So if you go on, we left the link here, where we basically interviewed them, and they talked about their most recent publication working with emergent language. And they basically define emergent language as unplanned language that is needed or produced by the learner during those, as Mike said, meaning-focused interactions, where the focus is primarily on getting the message across. And of course, once they try to get their message across, we can explore that language, we can reformulate that language, we can clarify, we can fine-tune, and we can support that. But what counts as emergent language? All kinds of things. Any sort of error will count as emergent language. Any sort of extension of what a student say, asking them, can you tell me more about that? That would also count as emergent language. It doesn't always have to be mistakes. It doesn't always have to be errors. It could also be things that the students have said that you consider to be interesting, you consider relevant, or even meaningful, and other students could also benefit from that. And of course, more importantly, because we want a more dialogical pedagogy, any questions raised by the learners about any sort of aspect of the language will also count as emergent language. But Mike, how do we combine these two organic approaches to build a sustainable business?
Yeah, so basically we work in this idea, this concept, this framework, if you will, of the 4 pillars of successful course design. And really what we can do is we can, as Leo said, we can draw on these opportunities to use communicative instruction communication to really work with the student and highlight and teach at the point of need, as he was saying. And how can we do this? Well, we can use self-study tasks. So we can use task-based language teaching strategies in our self-study and our independent learning. We can also use DOGME in our live sessions. As Leo pointed out, we can work with emergent language and really teach at the point of need, working with what the students want to say and helping them develop in other language options for what they could say in specific situations. Also, we can really build a sense of community, right? We can really use DOGME in particular to help other teachers get more ideas. And again, our fourth pillar would be, it's also important to get feedback on your ideas and your teaching. And these approaches kind of offer this ongoing teaching needs analysis as you really see what your students are struggling with and how you can kind of tweak your approach to suit them as well. So let's think about the learner experience in more detail. So again, task-based language teaching, how does that come into play? Well, again, they're working through self-study. And what we're doing is we're focusing more on meaning. We're focusing more on their learner ego, if you will, who they want to be in the language. So we're not focusing on teaching of language points. As Leo said earlier, we're focusing on the big picture. What's the transformation? How can they be the best version of themselves in the additional language? And how do we do that? Well, again, in our live lessons, we're working with them in emergent language, and we're really using these approaches, topics, texts, and tasks to really see what language resources the learners have. And then we're coming in and we're supporting them. We're teaching at the point of need and guiding learning in that way. Also, they're submitting work. The third principle, again, they're submitting work online or after their sessions, and we're giving them feedback on how they're able to, again, transfer this experience into their real world. And again, they're becoming part of this thriving community because, again, the way we ask teachers to design courses, there's always an element of community discussion, be it community discussion boards or with Q&A sessions and so on. So why does this work? Why do these four pillars all come together and really help drive a teaching business? Well, again, it focuses on results-based, not time-based. Okay, so we're basically focusing on the transformation. And again, because they're organic approaches, we're focusing on what the students want to do in the language and their own learning goals. All we really need to do is find the text, find the topics that they're interested in, and work organically from the bottom up with those texts. We don't need to design lesson plans because it's going to be our engagement with the affordances, the text, the tasks, the topics that really generate the language. Also, it's scalable, right? Because we can use this approach to teach individually, but group classes as well. And again, because we're spending less time worrying about our lesson planning, we can really get back to this work-life balance. We're focusing on ourselves, which again was something Monica talked about as well. And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, Jessica is able to use these approaches. She created her own course. She was able to go from working 40 hours a week to really, again, planning, designing, selling, and promoting her own program. And now she has over 350 students. And it's, again, through working with us and building her TBLT approach and organic approaches such as TBLT and DOGME that she was able to do that. Maria also comes to mind. And Maria has a course for teachers themselves, from burnout to balance. And again, by using and promoting these organic approaches, she was able to get a lot of buy-in right away, but she's actually growing her business. And the second iteration has really taken off. And then finally, Eleanor as well has really kind of used these approaches to really get students. And I think what we really take away from Eleanor is that students themselves want these approaches, that they're tired of using textbooks. They're tired of following the kind of PPP or teacher-led approach. And really there's a hunger out there for them to focus on meaning first and working with teachers themselves who have that kind of theory of language acquisition, where we first focus on meaning and then we can work on form. As Leo said, we can teach at the point of need. And even if you start off next week, it's just showing you that these changes to your teaching, these fine tunings to your teaching can really make a lasting impact. Leo?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And that's basically what we're trying to say here, is that I think we need to try to solve the problem of education by throwing less at the problem. And admittedly, this is not my idea. This is an idea that Tim Ferriss planted in when he wrote the book, The 4-Hour Work Week. And then Jason Fried and David Henson cemented this idea in their book, Rework, which one of the recurring themes of both books is the idea that we need to rethink the way we do everything. Neither discusses education. The books are loosely based on business principles, but applying business advice to schools is just, it could be, sounds a little crazy or stupid, but the difference is that these books took a much different approach to the idea of business. It was truly outside the box kind of thinking. And this is the kind of perspective that education reform, that education leaders should eventually adopt, because at the end of the day, everybody loves to learn. It's a universal human condition. And as a species, it is our evolutionary advantage. And a prerequisite to learning is curiosity, because curiosity leads to highly motivated inquiry, which often takes the form of problem solving. And inquiry leads to learning that is easily and readily internalized. And we truly believe that what teachers need to really start thinking about as they decide to move forward with their independence is they need to start thinking about productizing themselves. But what does that mean? Well, we have two words. We have the word productize and we have the word yourself. Yourself has uniqueness. Productize has leverage. Yourself has accountability. Productize has specific knowledge, because every teacher has specific knowledge. Yourself also has specific knowledge in there. So all of these pieces, you can combine them into these two words. And one of the things a lot of teachers tell me is like, Leo, but there's so much competition out there. Yes, humans are highly mimetic creatures. We tend to copy what everybody else is doing, including our desires. And very often, what you will find is you get yourself trapped in the wrong game because you're competing. You're not supposed to compete. The best way to escape competition is to just be authentic to yourself. If you're building and marketing something which is an extension of who you are, no one can compete with you on that. I mean, think about it. It's impossible to compete with someone like Oprah. Nobody's going to be like Oprah. So this is easiest to see in art, but even teacherpreneurs are authentic. So authenticity naturally gets you away from competition. And finally, one of the things we always tell teachers is if you don't own a piece of business, you don't have a path towards financial freedom. It becomes a battle between ownership versus wage work. And if you are paid for renting out your time, even lawyers and doctors, you can make some money, but you're not going to make the money that gives you the kind of financial freedom that you need to have. You're not going to have passive income where a business is earning for you while you are on vacation. And as I said, without ownership, your inputs are very close tied to your outputs. In almost any salary job, even one paying a lot per hour like a lawyer or a doctor, you're still putting in the hours, and every hour you get paid. And without ownership, when you're sleeping, you're not earning. When you're retired, you're not earning. When you're on vacation, you're not earning. And you cannot earn non-linearly. So essentially, you're always going to be working for somebody else, and that person is going to be the person taking on the risk, having the accountability, the intellectual property, and the brand. They're not going to pay you enough. They're going to pay you the bare minimum they have to get you to do their job. And that can be a high bare minimum, but it's still not going to be true wealth where you're retired but still earning. So owning equity in a company as a teacher basically means you own the upside, basically. So if you don't own equity in a business, your odds of actually gaining that financial freedom is very slim. And this is what John Dewey, adapting it to our context here, was saying is if we give clients something to do, not something to learn, and the doing is of such nature as to demand thinking, we know that learning will naturally, will naturally occur. But the question becomes, how do we do more organic learning and less of the synthetic learning? Well, we need to think about the less is more approach, or these organic approaches that we've discussed here today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you have any questions, you can always shoot us a message here. You can email us. You can hit us up on social media. We are pretty much everywhere. On Instagram, Learn Your English. We have a free community for teachers. We're also on YouTube. And of course, our podcast, Teacher Talking Time. I think we've just turned 4 years now. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ron.